Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and I'd like to welcome you to the Practical Stoic Podcast, where I give you practical Stoic advice for modern times. If you'd like to learn more about Stoicism, or if you want some added inspiration in your day, just go to my website. It's risetothegoodlife.com. If you're interested in transforming your life with Stoic principles, then I also offer one-on-one coaching. To book your first free session, just head to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching and follow the links. But for now, enjoy this episode. Hi there, my name's Simon Drew, and welcome to the Practical Stoic Podcast. In this episode of the Wednesday podcast, I asked you all to answer this question. Which lifestyle choices or other philosophies pair well with Stoicism in your life, and why? And we got some seriously awesome answers, and I'm sure that all of you who are listening to this episode will get some really great insights and ideas for how you can diversify your portfolio of strategies and philosophies. And before I start, I'll mention that there's quite a few answers to get through, so I'll take a break from commenting on answers today. Also, seeing as many of these answers are subjective, I'd prefer to let you all make up your own mind, unhindered by my opinion. So we'll start with a regular, Dan Monks. And he said, I began studying Stoicism in 2014. I made significant progress early on in tempering the passions and learning to let go of things beyond my control. In the summer of 2017, however, I realized that my philosophical progress had plateaued, and simultaneously I was in poor health. I had to make significant lifestyle changes in order to progress mentally and physically. I had read that control of diet and physical exercise were the entry-level beginnings of Stoicism, but I had been neglecting both. During the planning phase, I came across a quote from Epictetus that had always been useful to me when struggling to control my passions. The quote is, "No man is free who is not master of himself." I realized in that moment that the quote from Epictetus had application beyond mastery of the passions. Progress on the road to freedom follows from applying self-discipline to every aspect of life. And with that new understanding, I implemented a vegan plant-based diet and an exercise regime. I've been successful at maintaining consistent dedication to the diet and exercise plans, and self-discipline has flourished and spread beyond diet and exercise to other areas of my life. I am now much more productive than I was before I became strict in my food intake and exercise. My body weight has dropped, my blood has been cleansed, and my thoughts have cleared. I sleep better, work better, and study with more diligence. I am very grateful to Epictetus for his words of wisdom. So Dan, thank you so much for that answer. I really appreciate the time that you took, and I know that there'll be some really helpful insights in there for everyone who's listening to this podcast. And so moving on, we now have an answer from Christopher, who said, I think that cosmopolitanism is something that goes well with Stoicism. Cosmopolitanism is an idea that goes back to Cynic philosophy and was adopted and developed by the ancient Stoics, with the principal idea that each human is an equal regardless of wealth or position in life, and that we are all citizens of the world together. I began to believe in the idea of cosmopolitanism before I had heard of the term, which I only learnt recently. I'm unsure of what sparked this change to embrace cosmopolitanism, but it has changed my worldview from one of a closed-minded attitude to a more compassionate one. An example of this would be when my old mindset and I would see a homeless person. I would think, why are they begging when there are always jobs out there? It must just be laziness, etc. This thought process changed to asking myself questions about whether I could get myself to my current position in life if I hadn't have had the privileges that I've had so far. Every individual's perspective on life is different, and no two are the same. Everything you do in life shapes your individual perspective, and I feel cosmopolitanism helps to build understanding and bridge the gap between myself and other people's perspectives. So thank you so much for that answer, Christopher. I absolutely see how that could relate to Stoicism and be very beneficial for you. And next we have an answer from Nastasha. And she says, I was reading about Jesus Christ's life and the way he endured hardships while remaining patient and understanding towards people. It seems like there are a lot of similarities in principles and virtues between Stoicism and Christianity. It's just a personal observation, but I was reading a lot of Christian and Stoic books, and I even read about transcendentalism. and I decided to focus on Christianity and Stoicism instead because its virtues and principles are very helpful in navigating through life. So Nastasha, thank you so much for that answer. I really appreciate the time you took, and absolutely I agree that, many people have told me that their life with Christianity really aligns well with Stoicism. And now we have a response from Kimberly, and she says, I like a balance of Stoicism and positive visualization. I'm kind of new to this, but I feel like I need to balance being prepared with what can go wrong with hoping for what can go right. And I use yoga and meditation to bring myself to the current moment. So Kimberly, thank you so much for that response. And now we have an answer from Ibrahim. And he says, I find that libertarianism goes well with Stoicism because people who are mentally prepared for randomness will fare better in a society with no limitations on freedom than people who are not. Thank you so much for that answer, Ibrahim. And next we have Sherry. And she says, I believe both the 12-step recovery principles and the serenity prayer go well with Stoicism because they force one to look at reality with fresh eyes and not to waste too much time or energy worrying about what one can change, and they therefore bring peace. The 12 steps also compel one to look at the reality of one's past behavior, take responsibility for it, and try to move on and not repeat the same behavior. Addiction is almost like OCD, and the 12 steps help to cut off that proverbial monster. So, relapse for years was never an option for me because of the 12 steps. I still had emotional issues through my life, but they weren't too bad. However, when I went through a lot of grief and loss in the past 5 years, the principles of the 12 steps, while it had kept me sober, was not enough, and I was in fear of my sobriety and sanity. Stoicism helped to give me a fresh, objective look at the reality of the situation. And as a former recovery friend used to say, let your intellect rise above your emotions. Stoicism seems to supplement my recovery tenfold and prevents me from jumping on emotional roller coasters, thereby decreasing my anxiety. Now I'm sober from alcohol, but also mentally and emotionally sober, so to speak, and probably about as self-actualized as possible. So, Sherry, thank you so much for that inspiring and also very useful answer. I know that our listeners will really appreciate that. And next we have an answer from Jared, and he says, I believe that some elements of Buddhism are very helpful. For example, the nature of suffering, dealing with hurtful emotions and negativity, etc. While I've engaged Stoicism since being introduced via a class in high school back in '91, I've also recently begun to explore Buddhism more deeply, and so I'm very green. I've begun listening to a podcast by Noah Rasheta, and one fable that he shared helps me to remember to have patience, not to label things hastily, and to accept things as they are. Here's one retelling. A farmer had only one horse. One day, his horse ran away. His neighbors said, I'm so sorry, that's such bad news, you must be so upset. The man just said, We'll see. A few days later, his horse came back with 20 wild horses following. The man and his son corralled the 21 horses. His neighbors came again and said, Congratulations, this is such good news. You must be so happy. And the man just said, We'll see. The next day, one of the wild horses kicked the man's only son, breaking both of his legs. His neighbors came and said, I'm so sorry. This is such bad news. You must be so upset. And the man just said, We'll see. The country went to war, and every able-bodied young man was drafted to fight. The war was terrible and killed every young man, but the farmer's son was spared, since his broken legs prevented him from being drafted. His neighbors came and said, Congratulations, this is such good news, you must be so happy. The man just said, We'll see. So thanks so much for that answer, Jared, and also thanks for sharing that really insightful fable. I absolutely love that. And so moving on, now we have an answer from Catalin, and he said, For me, some lifestyle choices that pair well with Stoicism include eating healthy and exercising. Philosophies that pair well for me are Aristotle's golden mean, and his idea that happiness derives from a virtuous life. So Catalin, thank you so much for that answer. And next we have a response from Melville, and he mentioned a massive list of authors, which you can see in the comments on the Facebook post on our Facebook group, which is the Practical Stoic Mastermind. And some of those people who he mentioned include Joseph Campbell, Nietzsche, Stephen Batchelor, Sitting Bull, Uma Thurman, Eleanor Roosevelt, Walt Whitman, and others. And he also mentioned that the Hubble telescope helps with the Stoic practice of gaining a larger context in which to view personal dilemmas. And it allows him to let go of the reflex to control his experience by seeing the absurdity of that idea through the lens of the Hubble. So Melville, thank you so much for sharing that insight with us. And so moving on, we had an answer from Laura, who says, I've been a part of the 12-step recovery program for 25 years. Stoicism has brought the program alive for me again. The focus on letting go of desire for control and power and staying present in the moment inspires me and has given me hope for a peaceful heart and a serene mind. So Laura, thank you so much for sharing that answer with us. And now we have an answer from Gunnar, and he says, taking a more temperate approach to alcohol consumption has done wonders for me. While it may not be the easiest choice of all time, I reap the benefits the next day. Recognizing that I have control over it helps me to overcome urges and spend quality time and money on more important things. So Gunnar, thank you so much for that answer. And next we have an answer from Leo, who says, I have found a number of lifestyle choices that I have benefited from along with Stoicism. Firstly, I regularly fast, and this aligns with Seneca's advice to practice discomforts now and then. Second, self-control in regards to overspending and drinking to excess is useful with Stoicism. And last, accepting the hand that I am dealt, but playing it to the best of my ability. Amor fati is my mantra. And in terms of other philosophies, I believe Stoicism is infused with many philosophies and religions. For example, Christianity was greatly influenced by Stoicism. Of course, Buddhism has many similarities as well. Renaissance writers right up to present-day cognitive behavioral therapists have embraced Stoic principles. Stoicism is in the midst of a major revival, which can only be a good thing for modern society. So Leo, thank you so much for that answer, and I couldn't agree more that Stoicism is absolutely having a revival. And finally, we have an answer from Robert, and he says, although I'm a novice at understanding philosophy and the differences between them, I see many similarities between Stoicism and the Chinese philosophy of Taoism. I may be wrong, but I see similar teachings in acceptance of reality, being present in the moment, letting go of the past, staying true to nature, and focusing only on that which is in our control. Both of these philosophies speak to me in ways that are difficult to put into words. Taoism brought me out of a very dark period of my life, and Stoicism keeps me grounded to the reality around me. The basic tenets of both philosophies are a roadmap to who I want to be as a person, husband, father, and employee. So thank you so much for that answer, Robert. I really appreciate your insights there. And that actually concludes all of our answers for today. And so I want to thank all of you who have contributed to the podcast. You know, your answers were really helpful to me, and I know that they'll be helpful to other people as well. So I hope that you've enjoyed this episode, and I hope that you switch your devices to automatic download, because on Friday I'll be releasing an interview with Donald Robertson that you won't want to miss. But until then, I hope that this episode has helped you on your rise to the good life. Ciao. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Practical Stoic Podcast. I hope that you've gotten a lot of value out of it, and I hope that it helps you to live a better life. If you have enjoyed the podcast, then don't forget to subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when there are new episodes. If you really love the podcast, then I would appreciate a positive review, whether that's on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or wherever else you listen. Don't forget that if you're interested in one-on-one Stoic coaching, then you can head to risetothegoodlife.com/coaching to book your first free session today.